So we have hit the top of the hour. So I have just turned the screen on for the YouTube folks and want to welcome them too, and welcome all of you who are watching the recording as well. It's great to have you here. And thank you for joining us. I think we've lost track of how many of these we've done, but this is apparently number 7 for 2021. Go figure. Anyway, we're thrilled that you're here and thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office. And it is my honor and privilege to kind of be the host for tonight's program and manage the questions and do all of that kind of stuff. So I will be mostly in the background until you have questions, but I will be watching the chat. I watch the chat both at YouTube and here in Zoom. And at the appropriate stopping points, I will turn things over to Eric and ask him for his advice, or to Clyde or Angelica or whoever else might be our person. So let me turn things over to Eric to start with. And again, Eric, great to have you here. And thanks for joining us for number 7 in 2021.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, everybody. I think it's good evening somewhere across the country. Yes, number 7, and I think we're well into the 20s on what started out as a emergency COVID newscast of sorts. In any case, I was saying this earlier. Tonight's, of all the webinars we've done, I'd really recommend treasurers, and particularly new treasurers, consider saving this particular deck, because it has a whole bunch of information that's solid for another year. It isn't going to change all that much. So just to say that as we proceed, I'm delighted to have Clyde and Angelica here with us. We also have some other head office experts in case we need them. But you know that we always start with creed and a reminder that we are not alone in this work. We're all wrestling with some of the same challenges and so on. There could be someone there to mute, Stephen, but
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute everybody. I forgot to mute everybody. I have done that now, Eric, and I apologize for the interruption.
Okay, and I just unmuted myself, and I will keep going. So the other thing we always make a point to do is a land acknowledgement. And Clyde and I are in Toronto, and Angelica is up in Innisfil. But we in Toronto acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. This recognition must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. So with that, I will set my cursor, and we'll get into the meat of what we're going to cover tonight. So October 27th, 2021. First of all, there were some federal announcements relating for us specifically to confirming the windup of the wage subsidy program. We've got a variety of budget numbers and tools. Your assessment statements are online as we speak. And then we've got various other, all kinds of treasurer tips and best practices. Also at the back of the deck, after we say thank you and good night, there's also about 15 or 20 slides on everything from special tax receipting to some of the rules to how to get online for a CRA account, all the kinds of things that we've covered before, but we're not planning to speak to tonight. So here you'll see that The other thing that's online, I think earlier than it's ever been, is the treasurer budgeting tools that you need to get the particularly the sales tax and a few of those odd things exactly correct for payroll. That's online now. Normally we wait till we have every last data. If you're in Quebec, there still are one or two numbers that need to be announced by the government. But in the meantime, we wanted to have the core worksheet out to everybody so that you can be doing budgeting in a very reliable way. Also, a little reminder that all this treasurer stuff and all, this administration is about supporting the mission of the church. And just a thank you to everyone who's continuing to support mission and service, particularly through the generosity of folks through this period. It is remarkable. We did have, a dip last year with the onset of COVID, but we're actually ahead of that this year. And that reflects the generosity of our congregations at a time when, let's face it, things are still uncertain and tough. So very much appreciated. We're also trying to do more and more reporting, not so much even for our own people, but also externally. The concept of impact reporting is a big deal now, for anyone who's considering donations. So we've enhanced that kind of reporting and have that online for you. So with that, on to the meaty stuff that the treasurers love, I think, but general council commissioners have to have explained to them syllable by syllable. So the queues and the CERB are not going to be extended beyond October 23rd. For those of us that are still doing wage subsidy applications, and you should at least be checking every month, doing the arithmetic, that would be period 21. The Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which is paired on the worksheet with the wage subsidy, is extended, but with narrowed criteria. And I've found one or two congregations across the country that have been able to use the CHRP. It won't apply to most of us, but if you have some kind of staff increment in terms of your staff costs, it could work. And, by now regulars will know our mantra is trust the spreadsheet. For those of you processing, the deadline is 6 months after the applicable period. So, you've got till April of next year still to do period 21. And the advice continues to be, just in case you have an unusual circumstance, do the calculation for both the wage subsidy and the recovery program, just in case you have some kind of quirky situation where the CHRP gives you a better result. You can choose either one.
Just to jump in for a minute, Eric, the period 15, which covers the April and early May, the deadline for filing that is November 4th, which is coming up very rapidly.
Thank you, sir. Okay, other CRA updates. Again, this particular audience knows most of this. Some of you have been at every one of these broadcasts. The My Business account is the new normal. That's just the way we need to submit things. I have heard an occasional report, typically from the most experienced, like professional accountants and folks who really use these tools routinely, that they sometimes have challenges. I know of one report where someone's tried to submit their PD-27 several times on the My Documents, and they're working with CRA to see why it hasn't registered. But that is the new way of doing it. We will continue to offer help desk support for those needing to get set up or needing to clean up some kind of anomaly. And this week I've seen about a dozen cases, all of them already handled, where the CRA is mailing out their discrepancy notices for folks who maybe didn't do their PD 27 form that we talked about for months and months and months last winter. And again, the T30 deadline is back to normal. There's some effort to make all kinds of things go back to normal. So again, average treasurer world, you're online now, whether you like it or not, or you should be. The My Business account is the way the CRA basically almost forced you to work in order to get a wage subsidy. Church Hub and TeamPay are online solutions for getting you the information you need as a treasurer. As I said, your 2022 assessment statements are online on Church Hub right now. Despite all of this, if there's any benefit to COVID at all, it is that it has forced lots of us to realize that, hey, I can do some of this stuff when before it was kind of easier to say, I don't want to try. So a few numbers for you. I did put in the chat box the link to the payroll page on our website, and that has a link to basically everything you need. To treasurer tools, to PD 27 if you haven't done that, all kinds of things. But it has everything on one page, and certainly as a treasurer, I bookmarked that page. But anyway, minimum salaries are increasing 1.3%. For any newbies, the United Church uses a 1-year lag in their cost of living factor. This is not, necessarily what you might do locally. This is done to the minister minimum salary chart. And if ministers will sometimes contractually have X amount above the minimum, where again, you would need to give them at least 1.3%. And many people use the same guideline for lay staff as well. But to be honest, my own church has always given increases slightly above the church minimum standard. The Con Ed or continuing learning is $14.93. Travel is 41 cents a kilometer. Visiting ministers $224 a day. They're all listed here for you, and these are the key numbers. A couple of things at the bottom that are new too. There has been a decision taken to discontinue the optional health and dental plan. This is not an employer cost, but is something that quite a number of our paid staff had elected, and that's just proven to be unaffordable. But it will basically come off or be a change to payroll effective January 2022, and benefit costs have gone up a little bit as well. In terms of other suggestions, the wild card for all of us and all of you is on the revenue side. There are varying efforts to get reopened and so on. Depending on where you are in the country, the rules are different. So I'm not sure what assumptions you're making about revenue, but you've had to do them already. You had to do them to figure out how 2020 was going to turn out. And your 2021 forecast, 2022, we're going to have to do it again. As I mentioned, the assessment amounts are online, and the 2022 statement is online right now, and it includes a projection for those of you who aren't yet at target of what the 2023 assessment will be as well. But that can move with your statistics and how your revenues play out this year. So, we're looking ahead to when you're having to do some actual accounting, but you don't have to worry too much about the wage subsidies. If you're doing accrual accounting, you would have already accrued for period 10 last year, so you're going to report periods 11 to 21. If you're doing cash accounting, it's going to be more or less the same thing, but you're going to report whatever ones you received. And again, we just recap a few of, where certain lines go. Again, just a reminder, the wage subsidies do not count in your assessment. And the monies from the government are grants. And then I list here again where you need to be filing with your government reports should be the routine. The PD 27 is hopefully in the past, and it's line 4540 for any grants that you got this year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angelica, who has a wealth of information here. And again, lots of good recap stuff that experienced treasurers probably know, but maybe you haven't bumped into it. It's a lot of new stuff too.
Let me just interrupt, Eric. Number of questions coming in about the staff benefit plan that is being changed. And I think before we get too far away from the comments that you've made, I probably should just read to you a few of these comments. Some of them are about what's the actual impact going to be on staff? What are they losing? That kind of thing. And some of the questions are about how are the staff people being informed because they're anxious about surprises.
Sure. Well, two things there. First of all, I think I'm speaking as a staff person myself, there would have been an email that I think went to all staff who are members of the benefit plan. I think there's a paper letter coming as well. And in terms of impact to the people, there will be certain benefits. This relates specifically to the optional plan, which the employer did not contribute to. This was the individuals paid extra on their benefit plan. And by the way, last year they had a 50% premium increase, and it still wasn't enough, or not even close, to make the plan break even. So there is a takeaway, if you will, of potential benefits if you were maxing out practitioner claims or something. But there is no impact to the costs to the church. That premium will now be money in the pocket of the employee. Some folks might choose to buy some additional coverage. Others won't. But in the private sector, what people would be doing right now over the next 2 months is maxing out their usage of certain benefits.
Thank you. So there's no, Heather was asking, is there an employer share of the new group insurance plan? Is that going to increase in 2022?
Well, I listed the percentage number on an earlier slide, and we'll talk about that a bit more. The benefit costs go up a little bit from prior years. I think it's about a 1.5% or so, again, relating to the cost of group benefits and so on. But this change by itself doesn't affect the employer.
What about the retiree health and dental plan?
The retiree health and dental plan is an entirely separate topic.
Thank you. So those are the questions for now. Thanks.
Okay. Angelica.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me once again. Nice to see everyone. So the few slides that I have prepared for tonight is in response to questions that we often get asked. So this may be new to some, but it may be old to some other treasurers. So please be patient. So the first topic is related to the employment relationship that you may have with an employee. So just to reiterate, the employee full-time, part-time, temp contract is paid through wages. Obviously, deductions, benefits are provided to them. So we have to ensure that there's a distinction between what an employee is, a casual worker is, an independent contractor, and a fee for oops, sorry, my slide just went off. Oops. Fee for service work. Independent contractor and fee for service are interchangeable. You must have a business number or SIN number that is provided. There's no source deductions, and it can be paid through accounts payable and receivable. A casual worker, the distinction between that and an employee is that a casual worker is only called as needed and is paid hourly, no benefits, and the worker can refuse work. They have the ability to say no if they are contracted as a casual worker.
And Angelica, if I could just add, Clyde and I know this very well. In fact, I use Clyde as an example sometimes. Every year, United Church congregations get hammered on this on payroll audits, where we use this loose notion of contract employee, and we don't have to pay benefits. There's really no such thing. If you're an employee, you need to pay EI and, if applicable, CPP and tax.
That's right.
And if not, and if the CRA comes in, they will typically fine you a few years worth, like 3 or 4, of both the employer and employee portions that you didn't remit. And that can be a pretty big number. I've seen that number be in the thousands, and even, in a larger church, even bigger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can go back 3 to 4 years and you can be penalized for not providing the appropriate status to an employee. Absolutely. So the next slide, again, it's the questions that we often get, is the continuing education or telephone allowance that is paid via payroll is a taxable income and has source deductions that are applied. If you're not wanting to pay it through payroll, receipts must be provided, and accounts payable is the way to go. So if you attend an education, if you have receipts for telephone and you don't want it to be a taxable income, or it's not treated as a taxable income, you must ensure that you provide a receipt to the treasurer. The next one is a common reason for CPP insufficiency, CRA-PR report, generally 65 and under 70 years old. When you receive the CP 2030 form from the employee, please make sure that the employee has sent the original one to the CRA, or the employee can agree that you are able to send it on their behalf. Quite often, if you need the CPP to be stopped, the effective date for the employer to stop the deduction for CPP contributions is on the first pay of the month following the month that the employee has given you a copy of the election form. Honorariums, quite the topic again. Everyone probably knows CRA requires a T4A to be completed for an annual aggregate amounts over 500. It's a voluntary service for which fees are not legally or traditionally required. It's a one-time or non-routine basis to an individual as a thank you. Someone who performs a funeral or wedding on a one-time off can be given an honorarium. However, an employee who is asked to conduct a service, whether it's a funeral or wedding, it should be processed through ADP as a taxable income. Should not be treated as an honorarium. Again, volunteers who provide service on a one-time basis, if T4A is required, you must obtain the SIN number. Pastoral chargers or treasurers can do it manually, can issue a T4A manually, or it can be processed through team pay. The amount will always show in box 48. Next slide. Again, I think Eric mentioned this. We've been receiving quite a few emails with regards to the notice of discrepancy. The issue related to the 10% temporary wage subsidy you received from ADP last year. The PD 27 was to be submitted by the end of the year to CRA, and if you haven't, you must send it immediately. We have all the information on payroll site. The form is self-explanatory. We suggest that you submit it online. The website is, I put it also on the chat, but can also be found here on the slide. very easy to locate it. It's in the downloads, the spreadsheet entitled UCC PD27 Consolidated. You can search by your registered payroll number. It's protected, it's confidential. All you need to do is enter your payroll number. All of the information is going to come up. And as is, you're able to complete the form yourself.
And Angelica, did you want to comment? We had a slide for a record of employment. Did you want to say anything about that, or?
Oh, here it is. Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that one. I apologize. Yeah, so record of employment as it relates to COVID. Service Canada has published updated information to help employees issue ROEs. Again, block 16, there is the issue for the reason for issuing ROE should be indicate the reason for the leave on or separation of employment. Code A, shortage of work, layoff, reduced hours, close of the church. Code D is illness or injury. The next one is if you have a policy, a mandated policy that you're requiring employees to have a vaccine. When the employee does not report to work because they refuse to comply with the mandatory vaccine policy, then you must use code E, that the employee has quit, or code N, a leave of absence. The next one is if the employee is suspended or terminated for not complying with mandatory COVID vaccine, then you use code M for dismissal. So this is new also. Again, this if you click on the link, CRA is going to provide you more information related to this.
Angelica, before you go on, let me pick up the questions that have come in, because again, I don't want to get too far away from the presentation when I'm getting that. So a number of questions about payments. Let me just run through them quickly. Can a contract worker be paid through ADP using a special code? Or would a contract worker always be paid through accounts?
So it depends on what kind of relationship is it. Temporary contract as an employee, yes, through ADP. A contract employee who is being hired to do a specific work for a specific period of time, a scope of work has been determined, then it could be accounts payable if you have that business number or a SIN number.
Okay.
It's Eric. I'll offer use ADP for payroll where you need the source deductions and everything looked after. Write a check for something that's invoiced.
Okay. So can a casual worker work 20 hours a week and still not be considered an employee?
That it depends on the length of time. If it's only 20 hours for 2 months, it all depends. I can speak to someone, whoever has that question. You can email it to me and we can talk about it. It all depends.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to say we're not ducking that question. The CRA language is it will always depend on the facts. Mm-hmm. And you can get different interpretations, but generally, if someone is working anything close to scheduled hours where you control the tools and the task, they should be a part-time employee.
Thank you. What if a payment to a minister for a wedding or funeral is paid directly to the minister and not to the church?
I'll take that one, Angelica. The CRA guidance is that if it's, first of all, the minister should be reporting it. If it's a fee, right? If it's an actual agreed income, it should be reported. Secondly, from a CRA perspective, they consider that job-related income, and therefore it should be on the job-related form and on ADP. We're all over the map on that, folks. But again, the CRA always wants every tax dollar they feel they're entitled to, and we can't be abetting avoidance. So the recommendation is that they be paid through payroll if they're doing it in their job duties. If you come to my church for a wedding, it goes on my church's payroll.
And so the next question, volunteers do some regular weekly things in our church. This person says, like copy the bulletin for Sunday. We give them an honorarium quarterly. doesn't amount to an hourly wage and they don't do the work on a specific day of the week, is that a problem?
No, it isn't.
Good.
The only thing there is if it totals more than $500 in a given year, then it has to go on a T4A.
Right. So if you're giving out, if you have a visiting minister who comes once and you pay her $300, you don't need to issue a T4A.
Correct.
$500 is the cutoff, correct?
That's right.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That answers the next question.
Stephen,
Yep.
for example, if they come twice, you need the T4A.
Yes, thank you. Because it's $500 over the calendar year. Thank you. And the last question, just you skipped over the PD 27 form quickly and somebody doesn't know what you're talking about. Can you just back up and say that one more time for that person, please?
Sure, I'll do two things. I'll back up, but I'll also say that if your congregation took advantage of the temporary emergency wage subsidy, it was announced in April and kind of discontinued when the Qs, the regular wage subsidy came in. There was a 10%, you could take money out of basically your income tax bucket or the money that would normally go to the CRA. And it was a very quick thing. Most congregations had ADP handle the calculations and do all that for you. And if you availed yourself of that service, you would have taken some monies out of the basically the CRA's tax bucket. And now the PD 27 is a form which at the end of last year you should have completed, basically reconciling that yes, I did take some out. It was for this program, and the fields shown here are what it looks like. We have had about a dozen cases this week. The CRA letters, discrepancy letters, are obviously out there. And if you don't know what it is, check to see if a predecessor did something. I mean, maybe you didn't claim, but if you did, you need to have done one of these or the CRA will be calling.
Great, thank you. There's a couple more questions that came in while I was reading the things off my doc. So let me just, again, it's all about payment. We got a chorus director working 20 hours a week. Does that mean they're on payroll? And if so, do we have to pay benefits? This person says.
Again, it depends on the employment relationship. Did you offer an employment letter? Is this something that it was discussed? Did they sign an offer letter with regular hours on a weekly basis? I would need to know more information to determine that. So if they can send me an email, I'll be more than happy to discuss it.
Okay.
But Eric's answer is just a little firmer than that. Angelica's is the technically correct answer. You need the facts. But if someone is working 20 hours a week for you and need to be there on Sunday morning and need to be there Thursday night and various things, unless they're a part-time employee, almost certainly. We have a cheat sheet, and the CRA has a bunch of cheat sheets where if you have any doubt in this space, you should literally document why you think you got your circumstance, so the CRA doesn't think you're just playing it fast and loose. But 20 hours a week is probably a part-time employee.
And last question, and then I think we should move on. If a minister gets paid for an off-site wedding, what then? Does that go through ADP? Are they self-employed? How does that work? Or I suppose an off-site funeral too.
Yeah, fair question. It comes down to the facts, and at some point, I can't answer that definitively. Sometimes, the minister at my church is invited by a congregation member to do something, up in cottage country or something. I don't think anyone's going to get in huge trouble, but if it's related to their job, which is serving a certain congregation, then it's definitely on payroll. It could be that they occasionally provide a service somewhere outside of their job, and that could be income that's separate. Clyde, would you agree there? This is a gray area in any case.
It's a gray area, and one that I've experienced is where the minister's been called by the funeral home to come and do a funeral, totally unrelated. as long as the minister knows that they're supposed to claim it as additional income. That's the important thing.
Thank you, friends. I'm going to get out of the way and let you carry on.
Angelica, I think you got one more.
Yeah, the last slide is pretty much about ADP and the Bridge, which is a repository for information on team pay. I think everyone is familiar with that now. There's lots of webinars. There's user guides related to any kind of payroll transaction. The ADP service team is there to support you, and that's a number, as well as UCC's payroll service team. Please feel free to connect with us via email, via phone, and we'll be more than happy to assist you, whether it relates to team pay or whether it relates to payroll transactions.
And
I think that's all.
can I just ask one comment? And it's one that came up today for me. I know it becomes a personal thing and we try to avoid these, but I think it's something that others can learn. I did have a CRA come back on an audit and want to verify numbers. They want me to go in and use the pay slips for all of 2020. I can't access them through ADP because ADP was on a different program at that point. Now, I have not called them to find out what assistance we can get, but don't be surprised if that's a concern that we're faced with if you get called on an audit.
Yeah. So Clyde, flip Angelica an email with the particulars, because we want, when we hear of one case, the assumption is there are potentially many others. So
There will be.
let's get some particulars.
Thank you,
Okay.
Clyde. I'll follow up on that.
Yeah. So this is my slide. I just want to do a shout out to the payroll team. I'll give you an example. Henna Murati has resolved all 12 cases in the same day that I've referred to her this week on the PD 27 discrepancies. Okay, where someone's come in and said, "What is this? Oh no." She's gotten the information out to folks. Folks still have to file it on their own, but she's done the support and gotten the information out to folks. I can't guarantee that service standard every time, but the whole team, Olga and Eileen, and of course Angelica, have helped us leapfrog into the future. So just a big shout out and thank you. So Clyde.
Okay, I got to turn my mic on. It helps. One of the things that I've heard on a number of occasions in the last couple of months is that the CRA is looking at travel expenses. Now, yes, they're going to be looking at them in the corporate level, but they're also going to be looking at them through churches, because I've seen one of the requests already. Ministerial personnel are paid a travel allowance, and it can be done in two different ways, through a taxable allowance or on a per kilometer base. The claim is to visit parishioners, travel to and from their office to visit, or attend meetings away from the office, take training. Any of that qualifies. But what does not qualify is personal travel to and from the church and not on church-related business. And you have to make sure that there's a log kept, and we'll talk about that log in a couple of seconds here. The next slide, if we could, and by the way, GC account there, I just noticed on an earlier slide, it said 41 cents. I had 42 cents a kilometer.
Well, that's next year.
Okay, and it's what you negotiate with your clergy or anybody in the congregation that's doing travel that you're paying for. With a taxable allowance, it's usually a flat rate paid each payday with no required log. And then the ministerial personnel person will actually need to maintain a log, because they'll make a claim on their personal tax return, or can make a claim. And if they do, you will probably be asked for a T2022 Declaration of Conditions of Employment form, which says that you require them to travel, and that's why they're claiming this. If you're paying it on a per kilometer basis, again, the log still needs to be maintained, and a copy of the log should be submitted as an invoice for payment. Because if you're being audited for travel you have to be able to justify the amounts that you're paying out to different people. Now, the log can be redacted for names and reason, but that information must still be there if the CRA is wanting to know and verify the travel for proper purposes. One of the things in doing it with on a per kilometer base is that you can claim back an HST or GST amount, and you can actually do the calculation and claim it. So the travel log has very specific things that need to be on it: the date, the starting odometer reading, the finish odometer reading, whatever your total travel is, your business purpose. Parking, tolls, and other expenses should be recorded there as well. And all of that can be dealt with through a paper copy or using an automatic mileage tracker. There's many of them on the market. Mile IQ is a good one, mileage expense log, trip log. And what they do is they are available as apps on your cell phone, and it uses the GPS on the cell phone to track the travel. There's one, and I didn't get it on the slide here. I believe it's called Odometer, and it is proving to be one of the most accurate ones. And you merely push a button on the little thing on your dash, and it says start tracking. And you push it when you're finished, and it stops tracking, and it tells that's what your travel is. And these reports are acceptable to the CRA. So
Clyde, quick question. One of the things I bump into occasionally that I don't have a good answer for is ministers who feel that having the names of people is a confidentiality issue for a treasurer to see.
that's why I said it can be redacted.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the evidence that the minister submits for accounting purposes can be redacted or crossed out in some fashion, as long as an original exists. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, there is a simple way of doing it. And I say simple, it's complex to get started, but once you've started into it, it becomes relatively easy. There's a 3-month sample logbook. The CRA has approved this method for those that are doing consistent travel. And generally speaking, a clergy will do fairly consistent travel over the course of many years. You have to track it for a full year. That becomes your base year. And you know what the percentage of travel for business versus personal. Then you track a second year to verify the base year values. And as long as those 2 years are within 10% of each other, then it's acceptable working this way. The current year travel, sorry, I mentioned the 10%, to maintain the logbook for 3 months to verify against the same 3 months of the base year.
So Clyde, if I may, and I suggested to Clyde share this because some ministers like the idea of not having to write everything down all the time. This is a pain in the butt, and it sounds even complicated while you talked about it. But if folks want to get to not recording all the time, the CRA has provided this small business, quote unquote, exception.
Right.
And if a minister wants to jump these hoops, you give them that information and let them do it.
Yeah. Now, the calculation is relatively simple when I look at it, but the current year period percentage divided by the base year percentage times the base year annual percentage, and it's calculated the annual business use.
Yeah.
And yes, it's complex, but the first time you do it is the hardest time. The next times it goes through. It's easy to do this if you're familiar at all with a spreadsheet. You can throw this into a spreadsheet and it'll work very quickly for you. We go on to the next slide, and I just put a few numbers on it to give you an example. The first 3 months of the current year, the business use is 64%. The base year for the same 3 months was 68%. And the total of the base year for business was 70%. Now, we apply the formula to it, We've got 64 divided by 68 times the 70%, and that equals 65%. That's within 10% of the base year, so it's acceptable. If the total use is 42,000 kilometers, the 70% becomes 27,300 kilometers. That's what the percentage is for travel, for business, and you use it. You work everything else, and that helps with all your expenses for vehicles as well.
So again, treasurers don't have to do this. Ministers, typically it's ministers, can do this if they're the kind that hate the constant logging of mileage. There is this alleged simplification, and it can be less work if a minister wants to do the upfront work.
Yeah, and one of the things that's not on the slide that I will mention is if the CRA comes knocking, that is not the time to prepare your log. They will immediately disqualify all travel expenses.
Yeah.
Because a log is supposed to be kept current, not done in arrears.
So I hope we don't have too many questions on the travel log, but let's see.
No, there's not a lot of questions and people are answering each other. The one that comes up is the one that I haven't seen an answer to here is about multi-point charges and to and from church when there's more than one church under question here. Any comments on the rules for multi-point charges?
Yeah, to or from church is not the one, it's the to or from their office. They will not necessarily have an office in all three pastoral charges, but they will have a central office somewhere that they travel. That's personal expense. Beyond that, travel between the churches and that's fine.
You know, the only multi-point charges I ever served the office was in Demands. So there wasn't an office anywhere else.
Yeah.
And then I would visit in each town once a week kind of thing.
Right. So in that instance, again, some of this is a matter of how aggressive, like if even if you went to an accountant, some accountants are conservative, some are aggressive. But in a multi-point situation, again, document your assumption. If your office if you're a home office because you support 3 churches, put that, log your mileage, and with any luck, it'll go through.
Sure. Thank you. Questions about public transit and ministers using that for business purposes.
You pay the fare. If it costs you $3 for a transit ride, you paid the $3.
What if you're buying a transit pass for your minister once a month?
You can do that.
Okay. What about ministers who don't submit logs in timely fashions?
That's the problem, that if they're taking a chance on it, there's no problem as far as the church is concerned, because as long as you get it in the same calendar year so that you can record it in the books properly, that's not the concern. It's when they start not having it there when the CRA comes knocking.
Okay, good, thank you. I think we should carry on, folks.
Okay, back to me. Just to stress that Church Hub is a tool that every community of faith or congregation, whatever language we want to use, it is the way forward for us. It is where your assessment statements reside. It is where your statistics will be compiled. And if nothing else, COVID has forced us to more quickly adapt in this space. So this is really a plug, but it's a lead in to the fact that you won't have all these windows depending on your profile. Each church will have a super user that has lots of great tabs, but you'll only have, for example, a find a new minister tab if you have a search committee and you've registered as having a search committee. But statistics, annual assessment, information changes, all of that is Church Hub is the way we do it. So this is about statistics. You've seen some of this before. The annual statistics continue to be what drive not only information that that is used to try to set priorities for the church and figure out where to best allocate resources and stuff, but it also drives your assessment. So really important to get the statistics right, the correct email information, so that we're increasingly it is email. We don't just drop snail mail in every church the way we used to. Can't stress enough that mission and service is still the lifeblood of what we gather to do. And finally, the calculation of assessable revenue. So your assessment statements are online now, period. Earliest ever. For most congregations, there is a decrease in 2021. The exception to that is if you weren't yet at target. Because again, most congregations took a revenue hit. The assessment formula is based on revenue, and therefore, if you're at target, your assessment will have gone down for the coming year. If you aren't yet at target, my congregation is one that was looking at some pretty major, more than doubling, frankly, of the assessment. My congregation will get some increase in 2022 and the balance in 2023. So it basically we will be bringing everyone up to target by 2023. We're using a somewhat arbitrary number of $500. If your assessment happens to, if you're one of those that is facing an increase to reach the target level that everyone is hopefully contributing at, if it's less than $500, we'll do the move in one go, your 2022 assessment. If it's more than $500, we'll split it out, and half the gap will be applied in 2022, and you'll be at full target in 2023. And all of this is explained, I think, as well as it's ever been explained on the existing financial statement. We've put a fair bit of effort into trying to make it comprehensible. I won't say it always was. So on average, and I'll show you the statistics in a minute, averages are dangerous, right? Averages can hide all kinds of things. The average of 1 in 100 is 50, and kind of a meaningless number. The 11 regions will see decreases in their assessment for 2022. These are the regions that were historically higher assessing and were already at target. One region is flat, dead even, and therefore four regions are looking at increases because of some history of lower assessment. You'll recall last spring, if you were with us, that we really thought that COVID would have an impact, and that the target assessment would be coming down markedly, because folks are looking at dips in revenue, particularly when we exclude the wage subsidy, and that's exactly what has happened. So virtually all, and the reason I say virtually all is because there might be one exception, but 99.9% of communities of faith or congregations that are at target now will pay less assessment in 2022 than they did in 21, period. Virtually all congregations who chose the freeze option and are now looking at much smaller increases than before, and many that increase has disappeared entirely. And again, the whole idea of the funding model is to be sensitive to that. I mean, COVID was a kick in the teeth, but the model is doing what it was supposed to do. So this is a very, very busy slide, and it isn't something that we're thinking folks need to necessarily read, but I'll just pick I'll pick the example of regions. This is the 16 regions. And the far right-hand column is what they're, how much they're contributing in assessment in 2021. And then you can see the columns, what they're going to have for 2022 and 2023. So reading that top number, you'll see that the total assessment for Pacific Mountain region goes down almost 13% next year. However, within that, there's still $114,985 of increases to certain places that had lower assessment and aren't at target yet. So, this is really intended to show you a little bit around how assessment revenue is contributed to the whole and then shared across the country. And, we obviously have a couple of larger regions with bigger buckets of assessment, and they help out the smaller regions, which is very much a part of what the General Council aim to do with promoting sharing across the country. My favorite example here was the Antler River watershed, number 7. When I showed you these numbers in the spring, they were based on older, a year earlier data. Antler River was looking at about a 19.9% increase on average, and it's down to 0. And what that tells you is, that they were closed for a lot of their stuff, and they took a revenue hit. Again, that's what the model is intended to do. This data is shared in the spirit of transparency. What you need to do is find out what yours is. And you do that by going to Church Hub. If you have a problem with that, you can register for Church Hub with Susan Jackson. And I think each region, we're going to have the detail available as well so that they can drill down. I personally can click on, the pause. This is a pivot table. I can look at the whole world here.
Okay. There's a couple of people who are not finding it on Church Hub. Can you be any more specific about how they can find it?
It should be on the assessment, under the assessment tab.
Okay.
And depending on their role, they may, I don't know, they may or may not be set up. Certainly if they're a treasurer, they should be able to see it. And if not, please send an email to Susan Jackson, even now or tomorrow morning. So, most of you run active, like open, ongoing congregations, so you don't need to care about some of these rules, but they're intended to be fair and transparent to situations where people are closing or amalgamating. I include them here. I'm not even going to talk about them. The investment income component was something we talked about in the spring, and this was ratified by the General Council this past Saturday. So instead of trying to keep track of realized gains, unrealized gains, all that stuff, as we've discussed many times, we're taking a smoothing approach, and the assessment will be calculated, or includes a calculation for 1/4% of the investment balance. And the first 100,000 is exempt. Those of you who have been with us since the spring will have seen this probably about 3-4 times already. But again, we have a really wide range of investment holdings. This chart says that there are 929 congregations that have less than 100,000 in investments. And this would be restricted funds, managed funds, anything. And there's several hundred that have 0. And at the top, we've got 20 that have over $4 million. So the idea again was to assess those with a greater capacity to contribute. So the first question I've heard about assessment is, hey, I can't find it on the page.
Yeah, and that really is the only question there. It has come in, Eric, but there's multiple people now who are saying they only see 2021 under the assessment invoices. They're not seeing 2022.
The 2022, again, I haven't gone into the system. If it isn't there, I'll fix it overnight. But I was told that it is, and if not, I apologize. But just to know it exists. And even if there is a glitch of some kind, email Susan Jackson, sjackson@united-church.ca, and we'll get this figured out.
Thanks. No, I've put Susan's email in the chat twice now, and really that's the only question that's come up on this. Is people would love to see it and they can't find it.
Okay. And I kept talking about how great it looked too. That made it worse.
And there's somebody who says, I found ours this afternoon, but I can't remember how. Somebody else just says, I'm in the assessment section right now, and on only the 2021 invoice is there. So maybe it's buried somewhere else. I don't know.
Again,
I'll leave it with your favorite nerds to figure that out, Eric.
Thank you. Okay. So just a few reminders. I don't talk about COVID opening things and stuff. Every region has lots of material on that. But the governance extensions that apply to treasurers have been extended again. So this whole business around needing an annual meeting or change in pastoral relations or budget approval, each of those can be deferred right now as late as June 30, 2022. And, if reopening goes well, the general counsel executive might, say, hey, we don't need to go that deep into the year. But right now that exemption has been approved for your AGM and for your budget approvals and for that matter, for pastoral relations or holding an AGM. The emergency loan program is still there. We're waiting to see what reopening looks like. Right now, we've extended the interest-free date to December 31st, 2021. There's, some, it's not hundreds of churches that have taken advantage of this, but just to say that if there's a challenge, even with paying assessment, a loan is a possibility that it was part of the approval on this past Saturday. I want to talk a little bit about insurance because frankly, it has been a mess for the last several months. So again, just to recap for anyone who hasn't been with us, the rate increases have been huge. Whether you're with the UCC Protect that about half of the United Churches in the country are on, or any other specialty insurer, rates have gone up 50% or more from most insurers, have gone up about that amount for the program. And more painfully, the underwriting has been stricter. So it's been, they wanted new applications for the first time in years. There's more inspections, there's more questions, and the rates have gone up. So far, we can't promise because we're still negotiating, but we're certainly making the case for the UCC Protect program that, hey, we got crushed on this, and we're hoping to maintain premiums at the current level in 2022. And as I note here, having an empty building doesn't help you. If anything, that means you have to keep visiting it to make sure everything's safe. This is a repeat slide. So again, there are additional requirements around upgrades and so on, depending on how old your building is, and appraisals are a good idea to help make your case if you think your replacement amounts are too high. So there have been significant delays in renewal processing. Like those of you with September 1st renewals may or may not have gotten your paperwork yet. And that was true for the June renewal. And it's all got to do with this, these new underwriting requirements, the new application. There's been service issues too, there's no question. But just to say that the September renewal is the last batch that everybody will have gone through this stricter underwriting cycle. So at least that is behind us. The insurer has all the new information, all that kind of thing. I want to stress that coverage is completely enforced in a sense that we have done everything we could or should do. I mean, even if you haven't, the fact is that the insurer and the broker are basically responsible for this delay. So your coverage remains. If you have got a renewal statement, there's a lot more explanation of all of this. And as I say here, when you finally get it. And we're hoping, I'm also working on a completely different solution where we say, the insurance companies have to worry about their profit. They have to worry about all kinds of things. The idea of potentially almost having our own insurance little company where we all pay into it together and maybe have reinsurance for large amounts. I have a study underway for that, and we will very seriously consider that as a way that if the whole church comes together around this, we could potentially reduce premiums quite significantly, in the magnitude of 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50%, depending on what assumptions you make. Okay, so that's the insurance report. Again, you folks have seen all the various contacts, here for payroll, assessments, church loan and stewardship, and of course, getting set up with the CRA. Angelica, Clyde, and I have our contact information here for you. And I have sort of time for one more round of questions, but rather than leave up this ugly slide, I'm going to just put up the thank you slide. Thanking you for all you do. Thanking you for your support of M&S. There's about 15 or 20 slides behind this with all kinds of additional information, quick reference type bits, but you're not going to see them tonight. Steve, are there any additional questions?
I'm not seeing questions at this point. I'm seeing a lot of comments about insurance and people sort of talking to each other. A little bit of confusion, I think, from Bruce around what you meant by target assessment. Is that the actual assessment? Is that something else? What do you mean when you use that word?
Well, there were a number of about half of our congregations, depending on what part of your country. If you were in Ontario East, anything from Manitoba to the east had a different assessment structure, and many congregations chose a transition option where they didn't have to take the whole, the increases. There was a 3-year transition period. So if you were, and this would be on your statement, basically we say your target assessment is this, but right now you're paying something less than that. And the idea was to provide a buffer of time for people to transition, but a target assessment is based on the assessment formula, which in broad terms is 4.5% of most regular church revenues, subtract revenues that relate to external things like M&S, and then the investment balance thing that we just talked about. So target is what we want, is the equal, fair, transparent number that we're looking for all congregations to be contributing by January 2023.
Thank you. So there's excitement that you're going to have those assessments available tomorrow morning for 2022, and somebody else confirming they can't find it tonight. So I guess you're sending a sleepless night, Eric, and thank you for doing that.
I'm sending an email and saying, hey, I'm feeling a bit embarrassed.
I love it.
But that's fine. I've been embarrassed before. And I was certainly our target date, by the way, was November 1st.
So Bruce is saying that he clicked a button saying 2020 download PDF and the 2022 came up. Maybe it's just mislabeled.
There you go. Now, whoever said that, if they could put that in the chat, that would be great.
It's there in the chat, so you'll be able to see it there in the morning.
Okay. And if there is a mislabeling or anything else, we'll tidy it up.
Brilliant. Thank you.
But I hope you find it helpful. The whole idea is to present it in a way that you could explain it to somebody else in 50 words or less.
So,
yeah.
Tell us about cyber risk.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we have an umbrella cyber risk policy. There's a page on the website that goes into considerable detail on it. So if you're, it's like directors and officers where we pay for it nationally. But if you were hijacked, had a ransomware attack or something like that, There's a number to call. You can get advice on how to deal with it. Insurance kicks in around protecting you from it. The deductibles and the coverage limits and so on are specified on a page under the United Church insurance line, and we have separate pages for D&O, cyber, and regular property and casualty.
Thanks. Somebody wants to know, and this is probably a Clyde question, about mileage logs. Can you reconstruct that with Google Maps?
That's one way to try and get the numbers there now for what's gone on in the past. But that doesn't give you the starting and the ending odometer readings. And that's according to what's in the CRA, the Income Tax Act that they're working with. They're asked, it's supposed to be odometer readings.
Yeah, thank you.
And folks, as a treasurer, I butted heads with my minister on this, and I said, they're not my, pardon my language, they're not my damn rules, right? These are CRA requirements. And, if I'm going to be dragged into a CRA audit or fined or something, I'm bringing you with me.
So what if the kilometers claimed exceed what Google Maps says?
I don't check them. The log is the minister's.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I have been on visits where I got lost on the way or made a wrong turn. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, that's all fine. None of this is a hill to die on. What the CRA wants to avoid with any kind of expense reimbursement, that you're not just hiding tax.
Yeah.
So anybody who has travel, unless it looks like an abuse, then they'll come after you hard.
Well, and I'm with Liz. If the minister doesn't submit in a form that's acceptable to the CRA, the minister doesn't get paid, and that's on them. It's their money they're losing out on. So
it's way better if a minister says that than if the
I've been doing this for 34 years. I don't have much patience left. Get the stupid darn log. And when I don't, I take my lumps because sometimes I forget. But then I don't make a claim if I don't have it.
The way I look at it is it's really the small stuff, and it's not worth sweating over or getting into major arguments on it. We got to try and enforce it, and that's the best we can do.
So Brent is saying, does that go through ADP or payroll, or is that something that just comes straight out of accounts, Clyden?
If you're paying based on the per kilometer, I would take it straight out of the AP, accounts payable.
Accounts payable.
Write a check for it. If it's an allowance, that becomes a payroll issue.
Yeah, and I'm going to just say that most ministers, there are some very savvy ministers who know how to do their own tax claim forms, like writing off all their mileage and stuff. Most of them don't do that, and I would encourage your minister to pay off of actual submitted logs or receipts for Con Ed and so on, because it's in their best interest. Otherwise, the money in their pocket is taxed. If it's a reimbursement of expense through your accounts payable, it's better to do it that way.
And I need to say, it made my life incredibly easy when I started using an app on my phone. I struggled with, I have done this for 34 years, but mostly I didn't file because I couldn't be bothered keeping this stupid log up to date. And once I got the app on my phone, it was so much easier. I've been able to do it properly. So it's worth it, even for ministers who aren't tech savvy, to learn how to do that. If you can learn how to do a My Business account, you can certainly learn how to do a log on your phone. Yeah, I'm using an old one right now. But,
yeah, there's a nice dialogue in the chat box. Again, you can still pay out an estimate for 11 months and true it up at the end of the year. There's different things you can do.
Sure. Yep. I'm not seeing any other questions, folks. So I think we may be drawing to a close. I'll give people 30 seconds left in their kick of the can before we close off for tonight. Just because I know it takes time to type and then push enter before I see it.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, just to say, invite some topics. We are planning a webinar for next month. this was kind of an omnibus. We covered a lot of ground. Some of it is really intended to be a slide that you can look at if you ever have to use it. If there are suggestions about additional things, let us know. I know Clyde and I are going to do probably a separate one, although we might do it on a Wednesday night, for the annual T3010 filing. My current webinar for that's 2 or 3 years old. Yeah, so I'm seeing suggestions for budgeting, whatever you'd like to see. We can at least talk about the tools we use. And frankly, in some cases, you'll learn more from each other than you will from Clyde and I.
Absolutely.
I'm really impressed by how much conversation there is in the chat that I don't even have to lift up to the two of you. A question comes up, somebody else answers it, I tick it off my list. So
Brent and Karen are asking, is there a training for new treasurers? I actually used to do a webinar once or twice a year for that. And again, maybe we'll do that. We'll lose some of our hardcore regulars here, but let me commit to doing that over the next while. It wouldn't be difficult. I literally have shelf product on that, so we might do maybe a separate one. And Steve, if we could offer it, communication wise through United in Learning, that would be good.
absolutely, no problem. And we have a list of treasurers' emails, so we can send out notice to them too.
Yeah, and it would be good timing early in the year, because that's when a lot of new treasures change, is at year end, and things get dropped that are being important. Like somebody forgets the T3010 to mention it to the new person.
Sure.
And the sooner you can catch on to it, the quicker it is.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some people, agree with that. So we will actually build that into our monthly cycle.
So I think we've come to the end of our time. Let me acknowledge, as a minister on the line here, how grateful I am for treasurers. It makes such an enormous difference to the ability of the church board or council to make mission-focused decisions when they have clean information and they know the administration of the pastoral charge is in good hands. When you do your work well, it means everybody else in the whole congregation can do their work well too. And it's one of those volunteer jobs that is a little unsung and not always appreciated. And many of my colleagues don't understand a whole lot of what you do. But when you do it well, the congregation can do remarkable things for God's ministry. And when the money goes bad, everything grinds to a halt. So
Okay.
Thank you for your work and for your volunteer time and for coming out to these events so that you can do them even better. It matters.
And before you go, I'm just, I don't get to check the chat box when I'm presenting. Susan Jackson, who is my guru and has a direct message to me, please check the target assessment tab on Church Hub for your 2022 information.
Okay.
So
And it's under 2020.
No, well, I'm just saying, if you don't have a 2020 target assessment tab, reach out to Susan, or if it's mislabeled, we'll figure that out. But honest, it is there. I just may not labeled it correctly. We'll figure it out.
Brilliant. Thank you. I am going to take on my role as chair and draw this to a close. So many thanks again, and we will look forward to seeing you next month. I do not have the date in front of me, but
it might be November 24th.
That sounds right. It'll be the fourth Wednesday of November anyway, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. God bless and bye for now.